Over to our speaker or our chair for the day to introduce our speakers for this panel discussion.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can see me. Hi, Kechna. Okay, thank you. Let me take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the last day of our Library Research Week, and just say we are honored to have you still with us. You know, that you have really traversed with us throughout this journey of the Library Research Week, which is our commitment as both the library and the university to help our research community with the necessary tools and support structures to achieve research excellence. So today is a short day. It's a Friday. So we only have 3 sessions. So the first session, which will be a panel discussion, will be conducted by our Director for Research Services, Dr. Siviwe Bangani. And we are under the sub-theme for Friday, which is Let's Strive for Research Excellence in the Face of Adversity. I just want to remind everyone of the general protocol. Number one, we urge everyone to remain muted. You are muted by default, but please ensure that you remain muted. And also, we will have a Q&A, question and answers, at the end of the panel discussion. But if there's a burning question, you are more than welcome to raise your hand and ask. And also, you can use the chat box to write your question. We will go through the question. I'm actually assisted by my colleague, Songe Zombikashe, who's our scholarly communication librarian. I guess I forgot to introduce myself. Apologies. I'm Pagama. I'm a special collections librarian at the university. So lastly, the sessions will be recorded, so please don't try to record because we don't want to tamper with the systems, and the recordings will be shared on our YouTube at the end of this discussion. That is from next week. So now I am not going to introduce the panelists. Dr. Siviwe is going to introduce the panelists, and I want to hand over to him. Thank you and enjoy the day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mube. Colleagues, my role today is just to really facilitate the panel discussion. We have 3 panelists. That's Professor Marena Manley from the Department of Food Science, Faculty of Agricultural Science here at Stellenbosch University. Thank you for showing your face, Prof. She is a researcher, and I must just say that she is, the researcher that really made use of the transformational agreements that we have. She's actually on top, in terms of making use of those transformational agreements, taking advantage of those transformational agreements at Stellenbosch University. So it was only fitting that we invite her. You're welcome, Prof. And then we have Ms. Melanie Lynette Berli. She is based in Germany. She's the Director Open Access Business Development at Wiley. Welcome, Melanie. And then we have Mr. Sakile Mngomezulu, who's the Manager Scholarly Communications and Open Access here at the Stellenbosch University Library. Sakile, please show your face. Where are you? Oh, okay, I don't see Sakile, but I'm sure he's showing his face somewhere. But in any case, the panel discussion today is titled 3 Years Later, What Has Been the Impact of Transformational Agreements at SU? But of course, we'll focus, in general, what the impact has been of these transformational agreements. Actually, we'll try, to discuss the concept of open access and zoom in on the issue of transformational agreements thereafter. The format of today is such that I will ask each speaker 3 questions. And then thereafter, there will be discussions, involving the audience and everybody else. So each speaker will be asked 3 questions and they are given 15 minutes each to respond to those questions. I hope they will not take all the 15 minutes because we don't have a lot of time here today. First up, we will have Ms. Lynette Berkeley from Wiley. So I hope that she is ready for her question. So, Ms. Berkeley, if you can please explain to us the concept of open access and how it relates to transformational agreements.
Thank you, Sivive. And first of all, let me say thank you again for this nice invitation. It's a pleasure being here with you, and I hope your Library Research Week has been great so far. This is a really good question, Sivive, and I try to be brief in in light of the time that we have for the panel today. So basically, open access is a publication model for research articles. So the benefit of open access is if you as an author choose to publish your article open access, it is freely available for your peers and also other colleagues to read. They can share the article, they can really build upon your work. And compared to traditional subscription articles, there is no paywall where the articles are behind. So you don't have to worry about missing access for your peers or other researchers that want to use and access your research. So it really helps to increase also the visibility and reach of the articles. So it's really a nice publication model for your articles. It comes with signing a Creative Commons license, which is sometimes a bit tricky for authors to navigate. So basically the Creative Commons license, there are different ones. They regulate what other users and readers can actually do with your research. I think this is really important. You retain the copyright of your article, but it is really important that, especially if your research is freely available, that it's clearly regulated what others can do with it, so they don't, for example, do any fraud with it. So therefore, there are you have to sign a Creative Commons license. Like I said, there are different ones. There is a most liberal one, the CC BY license. It always comes with a clear attribution to you as the author of the original research. But we also have authors, for example, that make use of the more restrictive licenses, where, for example, you cannot take out bits and pieces of the research. It's then clearly regulated that you can build upon the work, but you clearly have to attribute the author again and also use the content in the given format. Mm-hmm. So there are also, oh, sorry, Sivive, yes, I quickly wanted to explain, because on the journal level, we have, if you look at the traditional subscription journals, most publishers now offer an open access option. So you can also choose to publish your articles in the traditional subscription journals, which we refer to as hybrid journals now. So it's then a mix of open access articles, but some of the other articles can still be subscription articles. But we also see more and more gold open access journals. So these are journals that don't include any subscription content anymore. They are purely publishing open access articles. And sorry, I think I'll stop here. Sounds like you have a question.
Yes. Thank you so much for that response. You did touch on the issue of gold open access, but the concepts that are being used in terms of open access sometimes can be very confusing. You talk about diamond open access, etc., etc. So if you can just briefly explain those concepts in terms of the different types of open access.
Yes. So as I mentioned, we have hybrid open access. So this refers to publications in the traditional or former subscription journals that are now referred to as hybrid journals. So it's that mix of traditional subscription articles and open access articles. I quickly already explained gold open access, but it's true there are also other concepts. For example, you briefly touched on diamond open access. So this is also an open access model, but basically it is funded by, it can be funded by a scientific society, for example, also an institution. So they then really fund the journal that is publishing the open access articles. And the reason why these different publication models were created was because what is a bit different to publishing in subscription articles, it comes actually publishing open access comes with a cost, a so-called article publication charge, to make sure you can publish your article open access. And as you can imagine, especially for some researchers, this can create a barrier to open access if they have to pay a fee to make sure they can use this option. So therefore, there are really different business models behind the open access concept. So if you think about hybrid journals, it's really up to the author to then pick or choose open access. So for example, if there is no funding available to publish open access, the authors can still choose to publish in the hybrid journal. But of course, it will then be a subscription article and not an open access article. So this is really also the reason why transformational agreements were created. If it's fine, I'll just go into a bit more detail what a transformational agreement is, Sivive. So
yes, you can just do that a little bit.
Okay, so transformational agreements were created because they use the traditional subscription spending that institutions use to fund access to research articles in traditional subscription journals. They really use that funding and transition that into agreements that also offer authors to publish open access. So basically, transformational agreements combine the traditional read access, because usually it includes the access to all of the subscription content in Wiley's hybrid journals, for example, but authors are also eligible to publish open access in the journals, which is really a big advantage because you remove the barrier for the authors to publish. They don't have to worry about paying the article publication charge. It is funded by their affiliated institution, which is really a big benefit. And that is the reason why you see more and more transformational agreements also in other parts of the world. And so far, we've also received really good feedback from authors because it has really simplified the workflow for them to publish their research open access.
Thank you so much. If any of the panelists wants to add anything on this question, you can just come in and add whatever you want to add. Okay, it doesn't look like there is any. Okay,
maybe,
Prof.
sorry, Sivive, maybe I can just come in here quickly while Melanie mentioned those CC by Creative Commons licenses. And I think for researchers publishing open access, that's probably one of the more tricky things, because each time when you look at those licenses, you're never sure which one to pick. So thank you for explaining those concepts, Melanie. Thank you, Sivive.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Now we'll move on to the second question. So if you can just explain to us, I think you have already done this. Perhaps you might want to add, something else in terms of the benefit and impact of the transformational agreements, especially the ones that are signed between Wiley and Sandvik. What the benefits are to the researchers. If you have anything else to add, but if you don't have anything to add, then we can proceed to the next question.
Yes, something to add, because actually the transformational agreement with Sandvik is quite unique. It's really the only type of transformational agreement we currently have in place, because besides the benefits of publishing open access and having access to the Wiley Journals portfolio, really also the content that is still behind the paywall, it also includes an author engagement program, which, like I said, is really unique. We only offer this for researchers in South Africa as part of the SANLIC agreement. And it is a really nice way to also include an educational component. So if it's fine, I briefly explain what the author engagement program is. So we actually have a Wiley Researcher Academy. It's an online learning platform for researchers. So for example, we grant, as part of the SANLIC agreement, we grant access to the Wiley Researcher Academy. As a researcher, you can do different learning paths. There are different topics for PhD students, for example, how to become a researcher, but also how to write a research article, how to really make an impact with your research, how to share and disseminate your article to make sure it gets the maximum reach and visibility. So like I said, it includes access to the online learning platform, so you can study at your own pace. But we also offer an educational training program comprised of online webinars, but also in-person visits at different universities. So I think, like I said, this is really quite unique, where we want to make sure that we also help researchers in South Africa to really upskill their skill sets to make sure they can really have, as a researcher, have the biggest impact, and also make sure their research is disseminated and visible to everyone around the world. And that's really quite unique. I mentioned that we only have that for the SANLIC agreement. And yeah, I mean, I can also say a bit more, like, for example, for all events in 2023, we had more than 1,300 attendees, for example, and part of the in-person visits, we also visited Stellenbosch University. So this is really also something that we highly enjoy as the publisher behind the Transformational Agreement, that we actually can get in touch and really have discussions also with the researchers and fully understand what are their questions around open access, what are some of the barriers maybe, where are some misconceptions. So it's really a nice way to also engage with the researcher communities at the different universities. And like I said, that's quite unique for the Transformational Agreement we have with SANLIC.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll now give you just 1 minute. You know, one thing that we have noticed as libraries in South Africa is in terms of, you know, the somewhat disappointing take-up in terms of these transformational agreements. So what would you suggest, you know, libraries should do, you know, more in terms of advocating for this, so that we can at least increase, you know, the uptake of you know, of this option for researchers? Because we noticed that some researchers actually publish in journals where we have agreements, you know, they could have taken advantage of this and, you know, published open access, but they just don't. So what strategies would you suggest that we should, you know, employ to advocate, you know, for open access?
Yes, I think a really good strategy is this panel today, because a lot of it is really about education, like really making sure researchers know about these agreements. They also understand that they can, for example, publish open access at no cost to them. Like I said, I mean, still the most barrier towards open access is really the article publication charges for some authors. So if you provide that level of clarity and say, we have this great offer, please use it. You don't have to worry about the costs, for example. I think this is really a good opportunity to just do events, really have education material. And I think something that we always recommend as well, it's usually not a one-off event that you say like, oh, great, now we have this transformational agreement. You really need to spread the word consistently and remind researchers about the agreements you have in place, either by hosting events, for example, or also education material, for example. So it's really important that you consistently spread the message, because we are always quite surprised when we talk to researchers and they say, oh, we didn't even know that we had an agreement in place and that we could use up that offer. So I think really a lot of it is consistent communication and education for your researchers. And you, as really the library experts, you play really a crucial role in making sure that you can increase the uptake of these offers.
Thank you so much. Perhaps we'll come back to you at a later stage. You do advise that we should communicate more, we should educate more, we should never tire in terms of doing those things. Prof, I see you want to say something, but can I block you?
No.
Because we don't have enough time. Or you just want to make
no,
a one-minute comment?
just waiting. I'm just waiting for you to speak to me.
Okay. Maybe I should move to you. I was going to move to Sakile, but
No,
I see.
Please go to Sakile first. Then I can do the final part. Yeah. Please.
Okay. No, that's fine, Prof. So Sakile, as somebody who's directly involved with transformational agreements at CPUT, what would you say have been, the impact of this at the university?
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much, Dr. Bangani, for the question. I hope colleagues can hear and see me. Perhaps let me start by acknowledging the definition of transformational agreements that is the first speaker did allude to. Also want to maybe add some information there, then I can move to mention the few impacts that I have in mind, then we can dissect them. So transformational agreements, these are transformative agreements. They are transformational agreements according to our own perspective in Africa. These are basically read and published agreements that are negotiated between SANLIC, which is a consortium that goes out there to negotiate these agreements with publishers on behalf of institutions to sort of ensure that our researchers are able to then publish in open access. Now, it's important before I mention one of the impact to say that with these agreements, our researchers are able to then now publish in hybrid journals without paying article processing charges, which are also known as APCs. But those who opt to publish in fully open access journals, then it differs from each publisher, but they do offer discounts, 15%, 10%, depending on which publisher you want to publish with. Now, I'm going to then now move to my first impact that I want to talk about. There is increased access to, should I say, scholarly publications. And as a result, or as a proof that there is increased access to research publications, we can look at the collaborations. I'm not sure how many colleagues are here that also attended the launch that we had last week, but Prof. Moyo did allude to the fact that we have about 53% of collaborations. That is, if we're looking at collaborations between our very own authors and authors internationally. So one could conclude that the reason why there's even collaborations and authors, they even got to a point where they know each other and they work together. They understand that they have the same interest in the same subject. It's because they've seen each other's work through increased access to research. Because these publishers, like, as I have mentioned, when I started responding to the question, I did allude to the fact that these are read and publish agreements. In as much as we promote open access publishing, but our researchers also gain access to publications that are there in the publishers that we have these agreements with. I'm also going to touch on the citation counts. As a researcher, one other thing that you become focus to is to ensure that as you produce more publications, you are also growing. That means that researchers out there, they are citing you, they are reading your work, and they are using that information to resolve whatever matters they have in life. Because when you conduct research, then you observe, you see there's an issue, then you see a need to conduct research. I'm sure Prof, after my response will be more happy to explain more on the citation part, because she is one of the beneficiaries who are taking advantages or advantage of the transformational agreements that we have in place. I'm also going to touch on global visibility. So as you publish in these open access journals that we have in place, you are also more likely to gain global visibility, because there won't be any sort of restrictions. Your publications will not be behind paywalls, so there won't be a need for you to pay a subscription fee or subscribe to a particular journal for you to access this. As long as you are affiliated with the institution that is part of these agreements, then you are able to then now access. So at the same time, if you publish with these journals, you also are able to then now disseminate your publication out there to the global world, and people can read and start citing you, and you grow at the same time as a researcher. I'm also going to touch on cost savings. We can't deny the fact that through these transformational agreements, the university has been saving quite a lot of money on APCs, which are article processing charges. Most of our researchers, because I work with the dashboards where we sort of approve and assess if an author is eligible to be approved for their publication to go for open access. Then I realized that most of our researchers, they process these funds or APCs funds from their divisions. So you can tell that since the introduction of these transformational agreements, the different divisions within the universities, within the university have been saving quite a lot of money on APCs, because also when they publish on hybrid journals, then they're not required to pay any APCs, but then with fully open access with discounts there, you can see a 10% discount and think it doesn't make that much of a difference until you see the balance of your APCs. Then you can see that with that 10% discount, you can we can make a lot of difference, and then that money can be used to improve the open access movement and ensure that we get the best infrastructure to as well improve our open access. Then I want to also touch on my last point that I wanted to mention, which is promotion of equity and inclusivity. That also aligns to the institution values, where we ensure that everyone has equal access to knowledge. They have equal access to information that is produced from the university and even outside through the transformational agreements that we have in place. Over to you, Dr. Bangani. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that response. I will not ask the other panelists to add unless they wanted to say something, because I think this was more, more specific in terms of, the impact to the university. Now, can you, because you are intimately involved, you are actually driving this thing at the university. So what strategies, specific strategies, have you used to try and increase the uptake, of these transformational agreements at the university?
All right, thank you. So my first strategy that I want to talk about is education and outreach. That includes your webinars, seminars, and just knowledge sharing sessions where we basically make sure that all our researchers understand the benefits of these transformational agreements that we have in place. So we do have workshops that we conduct. We do have webinars that we as well conduct. Since when these transformational agreements commenced 3 years ago, then we have seen that a lot of our researchers weren't really aware of the benefits that they can actually get from using or adopting these transformational agreements. Now, through our webinars, seminars, trainings, and these knowledge sharing sessions, we are able to get to a point where even well-established researchers, they start now buying into open access, because we can't deny the fact that it can be tricky to, especially with well-established researchers, to get them to understand that we need to now do things differently, because there is a concept of open access. Though they've been doing publishing for the past 20 years or so, and then we do explain and clarify to them in terms of the benefits that we have in place. And with those benefits, they see that there is a need, and they can play also an important role in the open access movement. I like to refer to it as a movement. And then we are also going to talk about the library support. I can't really skip that point. So we do have all sections in the library are committed to sort of promote or bring awareness on these transformational agreements that we have in place. We do work together. We also collaborate with publishers. I need to mention that my colleague from Wiley will attest to that. We do collaborate, and we have webinars together where they basically teach also not train our researchers on these transformative agreements, because it is important to, in as much as we try to get them to use them, they need to understand the benefits they're going to get from them. They need to also understand the criteria they need to meet in order for them to even qualify for these transformational agreements, because by the virtue of them existing doesn't mean that everyone qualifies. So we do allude to the key points that our researchers need to meet in order for them not to be disqualified, and they can take advantage of these agreements in place. Also, let me mention that we do have a LibGuide in place that sort of speaks to these agreements. That's where we also market, and we also explain and give guidelines in terms of those, or especially novice publishers, not really familiar with the publishing process, but with the LibGuide that we have in place, they are able to follow the steps, and where they need help, then we are here to provide support. I will just make an example with the newly added two newly added agreements, the Company of Biologists, as well as Taylor and Francis. So we needed to use our LibGuide there to sort of make an announcement. You make use of social media, also our library webpage, to make sure that we get the word out there. Everyone understand that we do have this in place as part of open access, and our researchers need to take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ngumezulu. I do think that you also, responded to the third question that I was going to ask you. So let's leave it there for now. We may come back to you. Actually, I think we'll come back maybe to all of you. Maybe I will move on now to Prof, unless they want to add anything to what Sakile has just said, but these tend to be specific to SU. So I don't foresee that anybody will really want to add anything. Now, Prof, I think you are the only researcher here. and you have made really, use of these transformational agreements. You've taken advantage, of this. Can you briefly explain how, as a researcher, first you got to know about the transformational agreements?
Good morning, Sophie. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. I must admit, I was really surprised when I learned that I'm using open access to such a great extent compared to other researchers. My very first open access paper, which I deliberately asked for open access, was more than 10 years ago. And at that time, the university had an open access fund. And if I remember correctly, I think we only had like one opportunity in a year to get that funds because of the cost of open access. So that was my first paper published as open access. And then subsequently, I published a paper in a really high impact journal. It was a invited review. The impact of the journal, I think, is now about 46. But I had my opportunity for open access, so I couldn't apply for open access funds again. But then the library picked this paper up and then offered to pay for open access. And that paper, whether it's due to open access, one cannot really know what exactly the reason for that could be, but that paper, if I check on Scopus, has been cited over 500 times now. And on Google Scholar, it shows that it's been cited more than 700 times. So I think that open access really made a difference then. But then I just continued to publish in normal subscription journals. And then in 2021, I became a partner in a Horizon 2020 EU project. And that project required that all papers published within the project must be open access. So my first paper, I wasn't aware of I think the agreements might have existed then, but I wasn't aware of it. So my first open paper was in a gold access journal. And but we soon realized the project paid the fees, and we soon realized that the project cannot afford to pay all these open access fees. And then when we published our next paper, was due to publish our next paper, I contacted Marie Tron, as our librarian. Elizabeth was on maternity leave at the time. And I asked, do we still have this open access fund? And then she made aware of the transformational agreement. And at the time, that was in 2022, it was only with Wiley and Cambridge. And she immediately sent me the list of all the journals, and that made it really easy to, if you want to go publish open access, you just, I just check that list. But I must mention, before I contacted Marie, I asked my student to check the fees for open access of the most suitable journals, and it varied from 40,000 to 80,000 Rand. So it is a huge expense that we saved because of this transformational services. So maybe I could just add quickly, when Marie sent me that list, she always made me aware of the journal finder option. And that is, I know this has nothing to do with open access, but that is really useful. So where you just submit your abstract and you get suggestions, say within Wiley journals, which is the most appropriate journal. And that is a really a good opportunity that I often use as well. Yeah, so I think I'll just stop there for now on this one. Oh, and then maybe I can just mention quickly, and then in 2023, I became aware of the other transformational agreements as well, and I've just noticed that Sakile actually mentioned Taylor and Francis, which is great to hear too.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Prof. What I like in sharing your story basically is the fact that you are mentioning that some of these journals are high impact journals, because there is a tendency where some researchers tend to associate open access with predatory journals, etc., which is not necessarily the case. It doesn't mean that because it's open access then it's published in a predatory journal. Some of the top journals are actually in open access, or allow open access formats in terms of how you publish. So I like that
Yeah.
comment. Is there anybody from the other panelists who wants to add anything? But this was just about Prof's story, basically. So in terms of, we noticed that sometimes, despite the availability of these agreements and then opportunity to publish open access, Prof, as I alluded to earlier, some researchers do not necessarily take advantage of this opportunity. So what advice would you offer other researchers with regards to publishing open access?
I just, I'll answer that in a second, Sophie. I just want to comment quickly on the Gold Open Access Journal. So in my mind, when I submit the paper for publication, it's not just about getting the paper published. It's also about getting feedback from reviewers to help me to improve my paper. So a really good review is really important to me. So I don't just want to send a paper in and then everybody say, oh, publish, publish, publish. And I think that's probably the concern of some people when you send something to Gold. Some Gold open access journals promise you that you will get your paper published in 2 weeks. And if they can do it with a really good review, that's perfectly fine. And I think that's one way for me of checking whether Gold open access papers are really good. If it's good journals, is if they supply you with a really good detailed reviews. So that's really important to me. Okay, so why people maybe don't use it? I think I remember now when I published my first paper in using the Transformational Agreement, I contacted Carita Nell and I asked her, but how will the university know that I am part of this agreement? Or how does the publisher know that I'm part of this agreement? Because I didn't want to submit a paper, choose open access, and then get a bill for 80,000 Rand. That was really my big worry, because you just click open access Gold and then they say it's going to cost 40,000 Rand. You have no idea what's going to happen. So when you submit, you can already select open access. And then they say, oh, it's going to cost 40,000 Rand. But when you actually, your paper's accepted, and she said, don't worry, the publisher will know, it will pick it up. So when you actually submit your paper, your pick, that's now in a hybrid open access. You select Gold open access, and you first see a brief invoice of 40,000 Rand, and it immediately changed to 0. Where say you're part of this agreement, Stellenbosch University is part of this agreement, and it goes through. And Sakile might not even remember. I know I'm never mentioning this Creative Commons licenses. I'm never certain which one to pick. And when you ask for advice, everybody say it's up to yourself. So and then you sometimes pick one, and then the journal contact you and say, you've picked this option. Why did you pick this option? And then you're sometimes unclear again. So I think that is maybe, sometimes difficult for researchers to select. I tend to go often for the most restrictive one. And once I contact Sakile about it, and he said, okay, once you've selected the option, you submit, I will approve immediately. So Sakile is the person that make that final tick and say, yes, Stellenbosch is part of this agreement. And literally within a minute, the paper was accessed or approved for open access by Stellenbosch University. So I think the one thing, just try and summarize, of open access is what you've mentioned, that people are worried that open access might be a predatory journal, or you might need good reviews. But the benefit, especially in my mind now, I tend to use hybrid open access, because you get the subscription, your paper still go, if it's a subscription journal, your paper still go into if it's still printed, your paper will still go into that printed document as well. And the other thing I've realized is, for some journals, we still have to pay page fees. I'm in serial science, so our most prominent serial science journal, we have to pay page fees. And when you publish open access, that's sort of absorbed into the page fees as well. So I think the one thing is probably people aren't aware about this aware of this agreement. And then that thing, when you tick open access, you're worried that you might get that bill. I think that's so if they really know when you tick open access, the university has agreement, you don't have to worry about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Maybe just to go back to your comment that you made earlier in terms of a funder that required that you should publish open access if you publish from research that was conducted using their funding. This is also applicable to NRF. Just to remind the researchers, they do also have that requirement. I'm not sure, to what extent do researchers comply. I do think that at some stage I'll do research just to find out, if researchers comply with that requirement fully. But let me just now, I think I'm done, asking all the panelists the questions. Maybe I'll just give you all a bonus question that any of you can respond to. So it's often, indicated that one of the most, enduring challenges when promoting open access, it is to find strategies for rewarding and evaluating it. Most people feel that why should I publish open access? There is no reward, for myself personally. So what do you think should or can be done to reward open access publishing? Maybe we can start with you, Sakile.
All right. Thank you so much.
1 minute.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Bangani. I believe offering financial incentives and rewards for researchers who publish in open access journals could really help a long way in terms of encouraging our researchers to publish in open access. That includes your grants, bonuses, awards for exemplary contribution to open access publishing. I think it will really contribute to more awareness and interest towards public open access publishing. Hence, our researchers will then now realize that they are being recognized for their good work that they are doing and also the role that they play in the open access movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Prof, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, if I can comment on Sakile's suggestion, this is researchers would never say no to financial award because every little bit helps towards research again. So I know awarding financial award is quite controversial because people are always worried that people started publishing just anything just to get that award. Yeah, so financial award is always great, but something you mentioned the other day, Sakil, which I haven't thought about this, and I spoke to some of my colleagues the other day and asked them about it as well. So I said to him, when you publish open access, how do you think about who's going to read it? And we always just think in terms of other researchers. It's really, we just think, oh, now if people who's not subscribed to the journal can read my paper. And you said, but everybody can read it. Your mother can read it. Your aunt can read it. Your friends can read it. And I think that is really amazing that open access really makes your work available to just about everybody with access to the internet. I think that is really a great reward to know that your work is really accessible to literally everybody. But yeah, so that is quite amazing to know that it gives one that opportunity, that the work is just literally available to all. We might not all be as good and the opportunity to publicize your work on LinkedIn and all the other social media platforms. I must admit, I'm not very good at that. And that's maybe something that you should try and encourage as well, is when people publish open access to really advertise their work. I try to get my students to do it, but I must admit I'm not that good at that. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure how to reward researchers.
No, thanks, Prof. It does, increase one's public and societal impact. We shouldn't always think
Yeah.
about scholarly impact only.
Yeah.
Melanie, do you want to add anything to the question?
Yes, so sorry. You wanted to say
No,
something?
I just, now that you mentioned, now you're mentioning societal impact. I'm
Mhm.
busy writing stuff where I have to say again, what's the societal impact of my work? And that just reminds me, that's what I should write. My papers are open access. My work is
Yes,
available
yes.
to all. That's
Yeah,
just, so thank you.
definitely. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Sophie.
That's a pleasure.
Yeah, I actually thank you for that, Marina. I actually wanted to say that as well. I think something that also you at the library can do, really provide more input, or not input, but basically more insights into really like the global impact of the research papers, because that's something really researchers tend to forget. That also your point, Marina, that it is really freely available. It is also really a great way to nurture the equity around the globe, because, like I said, it's not that researchers from other countries then also have to pay to get access to your research. It's freely available, and it can really have a much bigger impact on, for example, tackling the big societal challenges. So I think that's a good way. So you could, for example, also just provide use cases or interview some researchers about the impact of their work. So that's something we've done. We have a blog post series on our Wiley network where we interviewed researchers and also let them talk about the impact and really the increased impact their research had because they published open access. In general, I think rewards is a tricky topic because you don't want to disadvantage researchers that don't have access to funds, but it is also a fact that you don't get proper rewards for publishing open access, which can, for example, help your career advancement. It's a bit different to if you publish in journals with a high impact factor. So I think overall, we also need to work, and really all of the stakeholders in the research ecosystem, we need to work towards other ways of really rewarding researchers that go beyond the traditional routes. So I think, to be honest, I haven't seen that much change yet. So I think that would also be really great if we could all work together to change the reward system a bit and focus more on these kind of really increased benefits.
Sophie,
Okay.
if I could, sorry, if I could just add something.
Go ahead, Prof.
Just quickly, I spoke to somebody from a really highly ranked university in the USA the other day. They don't have these agreements. So I just want to add, we're really, really fortunate at Stellenbosch to have these transformational agreements. It's not a given that a university would have this. So thank you for this.
Yes, you are absolutely right, Prof. It really takes a lot of work. I know that those who are at SANLIC, which is the South African National Libraries Consortium that negotiates these agreements. They really work hard to convince the publishers like Melanie to actually agree to this. It does take a lot of give and take, but yeah, we are thankful to them for the work that they are doing. Now, I think we have to maybe give the audience a chance to also ask questions. I see there is one question. Naomi, I know too. Let me just first read the one that is online, and then we'll come to you. This one it's Karina. She says, I just want to check that I heard correctly. So when publishing, making use of transformative agreements, you may still get a surprise of page fees in some journals. I think maybe Melanie can respond to this.
Yes, so I also see that Jen is my colleague from Wiley already responded. So the cover page fees, they are already included or covered by the Wiley SANLIC agreement. Something that I want to mention as well. So for example, at Wiley, we have started to really phase out the publication charges because, to your point, Marina, you made that earlier, for open access journals, it just doesn't make any sense to have, for example, page charges or color charges. I mean, especially if the articles are available online. But of course, we are not sure, that can differ from publisher to publisher, of course, with the different fees. So it always makes sense to just check with your library what's included in your agreement and what isn't.
Okay, Sakile, do you want to add anything?
Yes, just to add, no, I did wanted to support the fact that it differs from publisher to publisher. With some of the publishers, you're not really required to pay for those, but with other publishers you do. But we always advise our researchers, as soon as they select or choose a journal they want to publish with, we will make sure that we go through the guidelines together, just to make them understand of whatever that they may overcome during their publication process. Thank you.
So it is best, to, when you want to publish within a publisher that is part of the transformational agreements, to check if your journal is covered. In most cases, they cover hybrid journals as well as, open access journals. And then for those journals that don't have an option for you to, publish open access, they are normally not covered. It would mainly be discounts. So it's possible, but I'm just saying that perhaps you need to communicate with Sakile to find out if the journal that you want to publish in is covered, or you can ask for the list of all the journals within the different publishers that are actually covered, so that you can, publish, fully open access without paying anything. So Naomi, if you can just ask your question, please.
Thank you, Siviwe. My question is for Melanie. We know all these agreements are for limited periods only, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And though some publishers have already extended the agreements through SANLIC, I'm sure at some stage we will reach the end of transformational agreements. What do you foresee will happen then? Will we just go on, and will everything hopefully then be open access, but will authors then be expected to pay their own APCs? Do you have any idea what is going to happen?
Thank you, Naomi. And of course, that's a big question. It is true that transformational agreements, they were designed to really help drive the transition to open access. So it's basically, yes, a temporary means to shift the subscription spendings and make them available for open access publishing. So I think what is interesting at the moment, you see lots of different pilots also from other publishers, and also collaborating with libraries, also about different publication models. We briefly talked about Diamond OA earlier. So I think we are really at the moment at that stage where I think really as a community, or really like an ecosystem, we really have to think about like, what does the future look like? Because what we also saw that some of the publication models or business models that have evolved, they also include not only benefits and advantages, but also disadvantages. So I think ideally everything, yes, would be freely available in the future. But what is also true, and I know this is also something that no one really likes to talk about. I mean, it is true that there is a cost involved in publishing. So it's not that you can just click on a button and say, okay, now the article is freely available. So I think really as a research ecosystem with all of the stakeholders, also the funders, I think we really have to work closely together to think about like, what is really the design of the future system, just to make sure that we also remove some of the disadvantages of open access publishing. Marina, you also briefly touched on it. I mean, predatory publishing is really a problem, but we also have to make sure that just because more and more content is freely available, that we still have the right level of quality, do proper peer review, and really make sure that these predatory publishers that just want to make money out of the business, that we really make sure they are not gaining more and more importance, and researchers pay a lot of money for nothing in the end. So I think this is really an interesting and really also big question. And I think, like I said, it really there's really the need for more collaboration across all stakeholders to really think about, like, what does the future state, really the best future state, look like?
Okay, thank you so much. Does anybody else want to say anything on this question, or shall we move on to the next question? Okay, is there any other question from the floor, colleagues, virtual floor? It looks like none. Maybe just to piggyback on what Melanie has just said, in terms of Prof's earlier comment about publishing an article within 2 weeks. The behavior that Prof was alluding to is really the behavior of a predatory journal. I do think that the main issue here is getting researchers to know, the signs of a predatory journal, rather than necessarily publishing in gold open access. So I do think that maybe in terms of our advocacy, we also need to ensure, Sakile, that when we advocate, we also explain in clear terms the issue of predatory journals, predatory, publishing behavior, so that, we can remove, this, shall I say, perception that where people associate, predatory publishing with open access publishing, because it is something that I think it's been there for quite some time, and it is something that we, as librarians, we take for granted. We think that, now maybe researchers have reached a certain stage, they know, the behavior of predatory publishers, etc., etc. Not so many of them are publishing, with those publishers in any case. But from the comment, I can see that there is that need to actually ensure that when we advocate for open access, we also explain the issue of predatory publishing and how people can be able to identify when this is a predatory publisher. Yeah, something like that. So that's a job for you now, that I'm giving you, Mr. Mngomezulu, to say, try to to explain predatory publishing as well. Maybe we can hold webinars, panel discussions like this on predatory publishing, so that people also get to be aware of what it is. Is there any other question, colleagues, before I close? Let me just check.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Sibiwe. Can I quickly just add to that? I dropped a link into the chat to the Think, Check, Submit website, which offers a nice checklist for researchers, just asking some questions, and it really helps you to spot predatory journals. So I think it's just something, if you don't know the journal, for example, you can ask around, see if some of your peers or ask your librarians if they know the journal. See if the publisher behind the journal is actually participating in some of the industry committees, if the journal is listed on for example, the digital inventory for journals. So I think it is a nice starting point, just to think about and spot some of the common behaviors and also elements of a predatory journal. So you can, I don't know, many of you may already know this website, but it's something that we usually recommend as well. It's not a Wiley website or a publisher's website, but it's really a handy tool if you come across a journal and don't really know, okay, what kind of journal this is. So this is something you can also visit and just quickly check.
Okay, Thank you so much, Melanie. Are there any last minute or last comments from the panelists? Because I see there are no questions.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Wangani. No, I just want to perhaps clarify that we do have sessions and we do talk about predatory journals. Perhaps we need to go out there and do more so that our researchers, all of them, can be aware of how, because we also share tips on how one can sort of vet if a journal is predatory or if it is a real journal. So I can always also share my slides to perhaps help in that manner, but also for colleagues who still don't maybe understand, they can always come to the library. I also want to squeeze in the fact that we do have open access initiatives and platforms that we have in the university. So I encourage all our researchers to make use of those. We have institutional repositories, data repository, and we also have other open access platforms. So I would like to also encourage our authors and researchers to make use of that. We have most of the information there, but if you can't find some of the information, please feel free to come to the library. We will provide every support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mngomezulu. Any other last comments from the panelists before I close?
I just want to say thank you very much as well. I must admit I've learned quite a few things today, so it was really a useful session. Thank you very much for this.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. So I think for me, one key takeaway for this is the undeniable progress, towards open access and the impact it is having in scholarly publishing. I don't think we would have, had this discussion if there was no impact at all. And the fact that transformational agreements continue to play a role of bridging the gap between the traditional models, traditional subscription models, and the new open access models. And this doesn't only benefit us or the scholars, but it also ensures that research is available to the community, to the society at large, and ensuring that some critical research findings are available to everyone everywhere. Basically, so that we can save lives through your research, so that you can contribute to SDGs. Prof spoke about SDGs, that's Prof Moyo, on Monday. So this is one way, basically, where we can ensure that our research contributes to the SDGs. I heard the panelists also advising us to always be vigilant to the need for sustainable open access models and finding new sustainable ways by which scholarly publishing can be accessible to everyone, irrespective of social status. I often hear Dr. Reggie Raju talking about the social justice aspect of open access, that bridging role that it plays to bridge the gap between the haves, the information haves, and the information have-nots. So as we conclude, I would like to extend my gratitude to all three panelists and our attentive audience and everyone who has contributed to making this event a success. Once again, thank you to our panelists for their invaluable contributions, to our audience for their engagement, and to the organizers for facilitating this important conversation. Let us continue to work together towards a more and inclusive academic publishing ecosystem. Partnership and collaboration, you can never go wrong with those things. A partnership is actually the 17th SDG, if we were to go back to, to the presentation on Monday. So it's very important, that we work together as, libraries, publishers, researchers, to ensure that, research is not a privilege of the few. Everybody is able, to access research. So yeah, with those words, I want to thank everybody for attending this session and the panelists as well. Yeah, thank you so much. Over to you, Patama.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
Before you
Yeah.
close, I don't want people to leave because
Mhm.
I'm picking up two questions actually. We
Yes.
have 3 minutes, so I don't want to us to close. I mean to close the 2 questions
Okay.
outside. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's just one question from Bronwyn. Should we be thinking of other incentives to qualify peer reviewing, which are not financial? Then the second one, what do you do to measure? Oh, sorry, what do you measure to show the impact of the transformative agreements? So those are the 2 questions that we have.
Mhm. I think the last one, Sakile, you did touch on it, in terms of the financial implications for the university, etc., but you can speak to it.
All right. Thank you so much. As Dr. Bangani has alluded to the point that I touched on, the cost, in terms of the cost, these transformational arguments, they play a vital role because remember, to publish, you are required to pay APCs. So especially with the hybrid journals where you're not now going to pay any APCs, it means the institution is going to save a lot of money from paying those APCs. At the same time, we have fully open access journals that offer different discounts. So with that discount, we are saving a lot of money as well as the institution, not just us, but also you as a researcher, you also are able to save money on your APCs. Let me also touch on the issue of collaboration. I did mention the fact that access to knowledge contributes to a massive collaboration, in a sense that for me to even decide if I want to work with you, I need to see your work, I develop interest, I know we are saving the same interest, we are interested in the same subject field, then we start collaborating. So there are really quite a number of things we can use or we can mention to sort of measure if these transformation agreements that we have in place, they are impacting the society positively or not. But so far, we know that they are impacting because we see the collaboration is growing. We see collaboration between different institutions, locally, internationally, and one could argue or conclude that this stems from the fact that we have these transformation agreements in place. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically there are hidden impacts, I would call them hidden impacts, where it's very difficult also to link, something. I think Prof did allude to this before, to say she is not sure whether to link the citations to open access. It's very difficult to do that. I think we need to also look at this, maybe at doing qualitative studies to find out, in terms of these impacts, qualitative impacts. Because if you talk about university rankings, for example, we know open access contributes to that, but it's very difficult to link it directly. But we know that these rating agencies look at the extent of citations, etc., etc. If open access improves, citations, then definitely it contributes, in terms of the university rankings, etc. Maybe the second question, should we be thinking of other incentives for quality peer reviewing, not financial?
Yeah.
So sorry,
maybe?
Bronwyn, I don't understand this question.
Siviwe, basically was thinking, yes, the quality of the peer reviewing is so important. I think Prof mentioned that earlier. She likes to receive good quality feedback about her paper. I'm just thinking, yes, that cycle of the peer reviewing is so important. So should there be some incentives to contributing to quality peer reviewing?
Yes, there are already some incentives as a peer reviewer myself, but I'll just let Melanie to respond to this.
Yes, so I mean, there are not really financial aspects involved in peer review, but I think you make a really good point. Something that also a lot of publishers are exploring more and more is how to make basically the feedback that you get more visible. So there are some initiatives, for example, for open collaboration around peer review, where it's also easy for others to see, okay, what are the discussions around a research article, and just increasing the transparency. So I think this is really also for researchers quite interesting, because sometimes it feels, for a researcher, it feels like a black box. You submit your article, you get some comments back, okay, but what do you do with that kind of feedback, which alludes to the point the professor made. So I think there is really incentives in terms of how can we be more transparent about what goes on when peer review is being done. Also making sure to remove some of the hidden bias sometimes in peer review. If you, for example, we sometimes also talk more and more about, let's just remove the names, for example, and any affiliations, just to make sure you can fully concentrate on the research and don't get distracted by, for example, the country the research is from, or the status, whether it's a PhD student or a very tenured researcher that has done the research. So I think these are really the right kind of incentives to make sure, because then it feels also more like a collaborative process, and also with the right level of transparency. So I think these are really the kind of incentives that I think are also really interesting for researchers to then engage in any peer review activities, and the level of transparency then also helps to make sure it's really high quality feedback you get, and not just some random comments, for example.
Thank you, ma'am. Prof, do you want to add anything for 1 minute?
Yeah, maybe just comment on the peer review. I know we had a discussion with another journal as well. I know the publishers are really sort of against paying for peer review. But I know, if I remember correctly, I think there's even some journals that publish the peer reviews with the journals, or sometimes make the peer reviews available as well. So I think it's probably more some of the more highly ranked, really high ranked journals. So where they're confident that their peer reviews are really good. Yeah, but peer review is really important, and we really benefit from good peer review. So the only way I think to improve this is by, when you review, to do really good peer reviews yourself.
Yes, from my own experience, I normally get an offer to access, certain databases. Let's say Science Direct, for example, for a certain period of time. Let's say for 60 days. It's not really a benefit for me because we already have access. But for somebody who doesn't have that access, it's really a huge benefit. And also to get a certificate of excellence, where they send you a certificate of excellence to say, thank you for the quality reviews that you normally submit, etc., etc. So they are thinking about those benefits, non-financial benefits, and they do, provide those benefits. Even though they don't always make sense to everyone, because for me, really most of these resources we already have access to. But I know that, for those that are in other institutions that are not as, privileged as I am, it's really a huge incentive that they are getting out of this. So, Pagama, back to you. Sorry,
Sophie, I just want to add one thing quickly regarding also the impact of transformative agreements. Melanie mentioned the other day that they have done some work, and they do notice that open access papers are cited more. So they already see the trend of more citations for open access papers. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Sophie.
And I actually just put in the link to the study that we've conducted
okay.
that shows,
Yes,
yes,
okay.
so that was really good
Yeah.
timing. Thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.
But
you.
please do take these findings with a pinch of salt, because these are the findings across all journals, across all subject areas. And of course,
Okay.
for the individual research article, the numbers can differ based on the subject area, also the attitude in your community towards open access. So there are different factors that also have an impact on the reach and the number of citations, for example. But it's an interesting finding for at least the Wiley journals that really shows the impact of publishing open access versus publishing behind the paywall. Thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you. Pagana?
Okay, thank you very much to our panelists and to the audience for such a wonderful and informative session. We are ending the session now. We have our next session that's going to start soon at 10:30. Thank you very much. Please make sure that you complete the feedback form. A link has been shared. If you can share it again, Gerhna, that will be much appreciated. Thank you everyone, and have a lovely day further.
Thank you again for the
Thank you.
invitation. Thank you.
Yeah,
It was a
thank you
pleasure.
for.
Bye.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Pakuma.
Thank you.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Sakili and Melanie. Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.